Hello there everybody, Sam's Trains here, welcome back to the Railway and welcome to another Thomas & Friends review. Today I'm looking at a main character that I've never looked at before from Bachmann. Today's character then is, of course, Percy, and I'm hoping this will be very interesting for a couple of reasons. First of all, believe it or not, even after all of these years, I've never looked at the Bachmann Percy before, so this really will be a first for me. Second of all, this is from the Bachmann UK Thomas range, which again is something I've never looked at before. All of my other Thomas & Friends characters, they were all imported from America, from the United States. This is the only one I have from the Bachmann UK range. So I'm really curious to see what sort of differences we're going to get here in terms of the packaging and the features of the loco. I do know that these British ones are DCC ready, which means you can easily put a decoder into them. But besides that, very interested to see what the differences are. Right, let's talk about price then. So you won't be surprised to hear that on Bachmann's website, the price for Percy is extremely expensive, £79.95 in fact. I bought mine from Tootley Thomas though for £67.50, which is a good discount. Tootley Thomas are quite good for that, but that's still an awful lot of money for what you would assume is supposed to be a toy. So my question today is this actually for your kids? Or is it more for you? Is this really an adult collector's piece in disguise? Well, let's get this thing out and let's get Percy out. That was very impersonal, wasn't it? Sorry, Percy. Let's get him out. Let's take a look. Okay, first look at the new British packaging then. So clearly it is based on the American style packaging. It's still this really horrible sort of blister pack thing. But the design of it is quite different. As you can see, we've got rolling hills, looks very British, doesn't it? Rather than just the clouds and whatnot that we'd get with the American range. It's got the Bachmann Europe logo on it, which is different. And it also says this is for use on 00 gauge track. Obviously, the American version says HO. As far as I know, they haven't rescaled these models in any way. I think, at least externally, they're probably about the same. But it just says 00 so that it makes sense to British customers, I suppose. And according to the packaging, this features a next generation 18-pin DCC socket, which of course means that some degree of mechanical alteration has taken place here. So is it going to have an updated mechanism that's better quality perhaps than what it used to be, or have they literally just bunged a DCC socket on this? I'll be interested to know. On the back of the box, I'll just show you this very quickly. It looks very, very similar to what you'd see on the USA range. A few different logos, apart from that, seems about the same. Obviously, slightly smaller range because they don't have every model, I don't think, available in the UK. But let's get this thing open. Now, obviously, you're going to want to open this for your kids. You're not going to want to let them do it themselves. I mean, you could just snip with scissors across the top, but then you've kind of ruined the packaging. So I'm going to try and do it with surgical precision, so that I don't ruin the box. Okay, so I've got a nice flap in the bottom of the box now. First though, I'm going to pull out the paperwork, I guess, and we'll take a quick look at this. So we've actually got a proper owner's information manual here with the Thomas & Friends logo on it. Any disassembly or assembly of this model should be carried out by an adult. Okay, that sounds sensible. It does say that these should not be run on carpet. That's interesting. So that's another clue as to who they're really aiming this at, because obviously kids are going to be on the carpet, aren't they? Okay, just some basic information about cleaning, and it says this should be lubricated every 24 hours of operation, so that's fine. We've got another sheet here. This one's also titled Owner's Information, but it seems more specific to Percy. So running in, yeah, it needs 30 minutes in each direction, a bit of info on lubrication. Here's the interesting part, fitting a DCC decoder. So it looks as though the top of the cab comes off. It says a Next 18 DCC decoder socket has been cleverly hidden underneath Percy's cab roof. So somebody's obviously very pleased with themselves for that little design. We ought to try that later on, see how that goes. Spare parts, warranty, okay, nothing of much interest there. So, at long last, let's rescue Percy from his blister pack prison, and let's take a look. All right. So, bear in mind, I'm quite used to the Hornby Percy. And so right now, holding the Bachmann Percy in my hands, I'm noticing quite a few differences straight away. First of all, I'm noticing how shiny this Percy is. There is a seriously good shine on his boiler, on all of his bodywork really. Looks absolutely fantastic. Second thing I'm noticing though is the weight. I mean, this Percy is very, very light indeed. Almost no weight to it at all. I'll pop him on the scales in just a minute and I'll let you know what he weighs, but yeah, seriously very, very light. But apart from that, yeah, he looks really good. Yeah, I have to say, looks really good. Let me bring the Hornby Percy in. And of course, the Hornby Percy is an interesting comparison because unlike a lot of Hornby's range, Hornby actually designed their Percy from the start as a Percy model, so you'd expect it to be quite accurate to the show. However, clearly, there is a massive difference between these two models in colour, in size and in proportions. Do bear in mind though that Hornby used a standard 040 chassis for his wheels and everything, so he is going to be a little bit different, at least on the underside. The faces, oh, that's difficult. I would say the Bachmann model is way better in every area, but I'm not convinced that it's better with the face. I would have said the Hornby face here looks a little bit better, but then again, I'm not a Thomas & Friends expert, so please do comment down below and let me know which face is the best for you. But anyway, the Bachmann Percy. We're going to take a much closer look at him and some of his details in just a second, but first of all, here's a little bit of Percy's history. Percy was originally brought to the island of Sodor because two engines, Henry and James, were on strike and he was brought there to fill in the gaps, I suppose. He actually started work as a station pilot at Knapford, trained up by Edward, who was a very old and wise engine, but today of course he is known for his goods work on the branch line where he works with his best friend Thomas. Percy is very cheeky and he loves to play tricks on the other engines, particularly Gordon and James, as those are the easiest to annoy, probably. Percy has always worked really hard, but he used to be quite naive and immature, and this has caused several accidents for him over his career. Today though, he's a little smarter than he used to be, and so maybe he has learned a thing or two after all. So there he is up close and personal for you, the Bachmann Percy. Now, I'm no expert when it comes to Thomas and Friends, but just as a casual enthusiast, having compared this model to some photos of Percy from the show, I have to say that this does look like a pretty good model. And with the possible exception of the face, I would go ahead and say the likeness and the proportions of this Bachmann model are definitely quite a bit better than on the Hornby model. But then again, Bachmann are known for being quite good at this. Everybody knows that the Bachmann Thomas & Friends range is a bit more accurate than the Hornby one. But as a reviewer, I guess it's going to be more useful if I try to talk about whether this is actually a model that you're going to want to buy, either for you or for your youngsters, and of course whether it's worth the latest price of £79.95 RRP from Bachmann, or a slightly better typical retailer price of £67.50. And I really don't think so. This is quite a basic model for the best part of £70 or £80. For instance, the weight, I mean, the Hornby Percy I thought was very, very light at 91 grams, but this one is nearly 20 grams lighter even than that at 75 grams, which puts this right down there with some of my 3D printed engines. He really is very, very light. Second of all, the quality isn't quite as impressive as I was hoping it would be, given how expensive these are now. For example, the wheels just don't look very good. Serious moulding issues going on with quite a few of them. Doesn't look the best. We've got moulding marks on the cylinders and whatnot, and here and there, around the back for example, the body doesn't seem to be a brilliant fit either. There are some noticeable gaps between the running plate and the body. Nothing too major here, I don't suppose, but the real red flag for me has to be this really unsightly seam parting line that goes right across the top of Percy there. That just looks terrible in terms of quality, doesn't it? And of course, for all of the Hornby Percy's faults, he doesn't have anything like that across the top of his tank. So that is really off-putting. Apart from that though, this model does do a lot very well. The finish is great. I don't know whether everybody will like the high shine finish, but I certainly do. Yeah, I'm a fan of that. The paintwork looks absolutely fine. You've got his running number, number 6, perfect. Nice red paint to the side of the running plate, grey on the top. lining on the cylinders, and also nicely painted wheels without any axles showing through. So all of that seems to be absolutely fine. One feature that I really like is the coupling rods and the crossheads and such. So much better than on the Hornby example, which was just the standard 040 chassis that didn't look very good. Yeah, this is actually purpose built to look like Percy, and I think that aspect is definitely much, much better. He is quite a bit more detailed than the Hornby Percy as well. He's complete with a vacuum pipe here. He's got lamp irons with a lamp fitted to the left-hand side there, which is great. No sprung buffers, of course. I don't think any of the Bachmann range has that, but yeah, they do look good, fairly good and fine, more so than the Hornby, I would say. Plastic whistle, plastic safety valve, which just looks like a thick coin, if I'm being honest, but yeah, I guess it's separately fitted though. No realistic cab, of course. Yeah, the cab is just blanked out, and that makes sense because we know the DCC decoder goes in there if you want to chip it. Does mean though that the windows are just blanked out as well, even though they are lined. Then around the back we've got a coal load, which looks okay. Yeah, fair detail to that. Nice little coal guard around it. Separately fitted lamp on the back. No lights here, of course. That is just a plain lamp. But I'm not even sure if the lamps worked on the show, did they? Oh, that's another one for the comments. And then the final thing is that we do have the standard Bachmann Thomas coupling on the back of Percy, but not on the front, nor do we have any way of actually putting one on the front because all the fittings for that are missing. What on earth is going on with that? Blimey, Percy is a shunting engine. Surely the option to have a front coupling should have been provided. Now, these couplings are removable, so yes, it would have been less realistic to have one on the front, but you know, it's just one screw and then it's gone. So I don't really understand why we've only got a rear coupling here. That does seem a pity, doesn't it? But yeah, apart from that, absolutely fine. Very lightweight. I don't think it's really worth the money, but he certainly looks like a pretty good Percy, if you ask me. Okay, let's move on. Let's talk about the mechanism, see what they've changed, if anything, and of course we'll also see what the performance is like. So there he is then, down onto the track, the lovely Bachmann Percy, and I've already filmed the first performance test, and I'll show you how that went in just a second. Next though, we need to talk about the mechanism. We need to discuss what's inside the model, as well as what's outside the model. So let's start by investigating how easy this so-called clever DCC fitting solution was. So the removal of the top of the cab seems nice and easy. Yeah, it's not too solidly stuck on there. But then look, the DCC socket is on the top of the circuit board and not the bottom, so you've got to unscrew the circuit board. Can you believe this? Unscrew the circuit board to get the decoder into position. Now, to say they flattered themselves by calling this a clever design, they actually called it a clever design in the instructions. I can't believe it. Yeah, I'm afraid you've not been quite as clever as you thought, Bachmann. Yeah, put the decoder socket on the bottom of the board and then we'll agree, yeah, that's a clever design. The base keeper plate is fairly decent, just 3 screws, and that gives you full access to the axles. So for maintenance, this model is not a problem. Yeah, that's very good. Notice though there are no proper bearings on the driving axles. Again, for a very basic model at this high price, that is unacceptable in my opinion. And then here is the nightmare fuel that is the Loco chassis. The body is very frustrating to remove, so heaven help you if you ever need to get inside. The tank's split in two, the face is another part, the cab is another part, the running plate is a separate part. The whistle came off and slipped inside the model when I disassembled it, and I'm going to have to get that out on another occasion because I don't want to fully disassemble the mechanism. But yeah, very, very overcomplicated for such a simple model really. The motor, very small motor, couldn't say whether it's a 3-pole or a 5-pole, I would guess 3, but I don't know for sure, so I'm not going to knock it down at all. I must say though, it's a very compact looking design. I mean, look at this, it's pretty impressive. And then in terms of the gauge, this is pretty much spot on at 14.3 to 14.4, which is near as damn it to the standard. So that's the mechanism, a little bit disappointing in some areas, but at least it's serviceable. Okay, let's move on and I'll show you the performance test. So there he is, ready for his first performance test, and I think because of how expensive this is, my expectations are very, very high for performance. Pretty much we're looking for perfect performance here, aren't we? Because clearly the money wasn't really spent on the level of detail because it is quite a simple model. So first question, does Percy actually work? Let's go for forwards direction and let's find out. Here we go. Okay. So he limped forwards and then stopped backwards. Probably just needs a bit of a warm up. Oh, there we go. So this is 50% speed. Are we going okay now? Alright, so it seems to be a fairly good speed, I would say. Yeah, it's not too fast, not too slow. And let's see what the top speed's like, just if you're interested in that. Top speed, not awfully fast. No, not awfully fast. So decent gearing, I would say. Let's see what the crawl is like. And again, this has not been running yet, so it will need 30 minutes in either direction before it's at its best. But here we go. Let's try a crawl. Alright, so I think really that is pretty impressive. It's cogging quite a bit, but you can't deny that's very, very slow. So the control there at the low end seems to be really good. What's the torque like? Let's turn it up a little bit. 50%. Alright, so the torque is really good. Yeah, possibly, I mean, the loco is very light, so it's not like it's doing a lot of work there, but doesn't actually slow down noticeably under load. So that's a good sign. So actually, I mean, I don't know what the mechanism itself is like, but in terms of the raw performance, it doesn't seem bad. It seems to be really quite smooth. Yeah, that's impressive. Let's take a look at the eye mechanism then. I think with some of the engines, the eye movement is quite manic and it looks a bit too fast, but Percy's much better. This is at 50% here, and it's quite a calm eye movement. Doesn't look like he's having some sort of major seizure at the moment, which I think is always nice for Thomas & Friends engines, really, particularly if this is something you're going to give to your kid. 50% speed, 100%, yeah, even at max speed, the eye movement is quite subdued. So, yeah, I like that. It's really good and subtle, very nice. The way this is performing is really, really impressive, as well it should be, obviously, at this price. So let's get him running then, 30 minutes in each direction as instructed, and let's see how he gets on around the layout. Off we go, Percy. Yeah, this is properly good. Yeah, it's absolutely fine. No slowing down or anything. I mean, it's an 040, so that would be unlikely, but there's clearly a good amount of torque in the mechanism, as I've already shown. No real fluctuation in speed, seems to be reasonably smooth. The noise is not offensive. I wouldn't say it was too loud or anything. Yeah, this is absolutely fine. And the Bachmann, Thomas & Friends characters can fall into two categories. You've got the ones like, oh, well, I found Gordon and Henry. They were really sluggish and underpowered. And then there are ones like this, and I guess Oliver and Rosie, which just seem to run with plenty of power and they're absolutely fine. So that's really good to see. Yes, this is an expensive model, but at least that is reflected in the performance. So that's awesome. I'll keep Percy running in, and then I'll be back in just a second, and we'll get him to couple up to some wagons. Okay folks, that is Percy fully running. He's had a chance to stretch his legs properly now, and yeah, seems to be absolutely fine. Never derailed, never cut out or anything like that. Seems to be absolutely perfect. And how's that crawl now? Let's have another look. Yeah, it's really, really good. I would say that's better. Yeah, better than before. Don't know, I'm not convinced there's a 5-pole motor in there, folks. But whatever is in there is obviously performing pretty well. Yeah, look at that. This is going to allow you to be very realistic in reenacting scenes from the show. I mean, let's be honest, this is very, very good. Let's see how it is on points. Let's go, not too slow, let's go about sort of that sort of speed, and we'll take him over the dead zone. The dead zone is here. Because his wheelbase isn't that short, so I'm thinking he might be able to get over it without stopping, which would be quite impressive. Ah, no, okay. High speed then, let's go a little bit faster, see if we can back you up. I think that speed should be acceptable. Yeah, not really, I didn't even see a stutter there, so yeah, it's alright, pretty good. So the performance is way up there. Yeah, it's way up there, it's more than I expected, yeah. Much better. Okay, pulling power, let's talk about that. So the tractive effort I measured was quite low, obviously because he's a very light engine, 0.14 newtons, which translates to around 12 coaches. So yeah, it is kind of 3D printed light loco territory. But I've got these wagons coupled together, some open wagons, some tankers, a brake van, and we'll see how he gets on. So let me back Percy up and let's see how the coupling goes. Okay. Steady. All right, have we got them? Yep, I think so. So that's a successful coupling straight away. That's very impressive. Let's make sure. Yeah, they've gone together well. Right, and now then, let's see if we can haul them. Now, it's not very many, of course, not very many wagons here at all, but he is a very light loco, so if he can manage these, I'll be quite impressed. And then on the inside line, we've got Percy's mate, well, Percy's pal. You've got to watch what you say on the internet these days. It is, of course, Thomas, who's going nice and steadily. More steadily than usual, I feel. Maybe he'll speed up. Either way, he's got Annie and Clarabelle, as you can see. And then on the inside line, we have the Bachmann Percy's weird, distant cousin, I suppose. The Hornby Percy, which is a good runner, I have to say, but I think he's definitely been outperformed by the Bachmann Percy. Let's see how Percy gets on. So at the moment, he seems absolutely fine, and as you can see, there's no slowing down or anything on the curves. But is he going to make it up Gordon's Hill with all of these wagons? Well, let's see. Hopefully he will. And don't forget to see which other Sodor engines you can spot in the sidings, and I will pin the first comment to correctly identify the odd one out among them. So I guess he was wheel slipping maybe a tiny bit, not that noticeably. He's done it without any problems. So I have to say, you know, it's not that much of an impressive mechanism, to be honest. And yet, the performance is absolutely fantastic. Yeah, there is absolutely nothing wrong with the way this runs. How long is it going to last? I couldn't tell you. Yes, like I say, on the inside it doesn't seem like the greatest mechanism, but at least outwardly, he looks and he performs excellently. Really, really excellently, which is not necessarily what I was expecting. And I've heard quite bad things about the Bachmann Percy. I haven't looked too much into them because I don't want anything to sway my review, but from what I've seen today, it's a perfectly good model. Yeah, very expensive, of course, not really worth what it costs, but yeah, I'm not disappointed really in this purchase. Now, if you're a serious Thomas & Friends fan, then maybe there are inaccuracies in the aesthetics of this model that perhaps I've missed. And if that's the case, I'm sure you'll comment down below. But otherwise, yeah, this looks perfectly good. Let's have some ratings then for the Bachmann Percy. The level of detail is a bit of a mixed bag, I think, isn't it? I'm not that keen on the face, and I suspect others will feel the same. The modular body doesn't seem that realistic because there are a lot of cracks in it because of all the joins, and it doesn't really fit to the running plate that well. You've got the closed cab, which isn't that realistic, of course. In the show, he does have an open cab. But then on the other hand, the proportions of Percy here look to be really good and spot on. The buffer beams are well detailed, you've got the separately fitted lamps and such. It's really not too bad. The performance though was really, really good. It's a very, very solid performer. I think we've seen a slightly better crawl from other locos, and obviously it's a little bit unreliable over the express points, but I think that's pretty much to be expected from a small 040. So I've only knocked off half a star. Generally the performance is really good and it handles a train fine, plenty of torque, etc, etc. The pulling power is not brilliant. It's not terrible. I mean, it's the same as an 040 Peckett, which is generally quite a good hauler. It's the same as a Bachmann Earl class, which is a very light 440. So it could be worse, but it's not amazing. The mechanism, again, it's okay, not as good as I was expecting given how expensive this model is, but it's okay. So it doesn't have the proper bearings on the axles, that's a big no-no for me, and also it's a little bit of a strange design. It is accessible for servicing and such, you can get to the axles very easily, but if you want to take the body off for whatever reason, that's a bit of a faff. And even if you want to fit the DCC decoder, it's not as simple as it looks on the instructions because you've still got to undo screws and faff around, so silly design there, but overall, yeah, the mechanism's not too bad. Not sure if it's got a 3 or a 5-pole motor though. Quality then, 2.5, I've given it a middle of the road score here. Generally the build quality is not too bad, all of the pieces were straight, there was nothing missing, nothing like that. However, it's a very light and plasticky model. Most of the chassis is just made out of plastic, which isn't great. It's got quite a plasticky finish and there's quite a few moulding marks on the model as well. Not the greatest quality in the world. I think a bit more weight, a bit more metal would have made this slightly more worth the money. And speaking of the money, £67.50 is what I paid, or £79.95 as an RRP, for a basic model with a basic mechanism with no lights or no impressive features. This is far too much money in my opinion. This kind of model is supposed to appeal to youngsters, and it would have been really nice to see this made available at pocket money prices. I think at the best part of 80 quid, that's not what we're seeing here, but I guess it is what it is. Overall then, that is 6.04 out of 10. Let's put that into the logbook, and it is 36th place, above the Gandhi Dancer and below the EFE Class 35. Yeah, it could be worse, and if you do want a Percy in HO or 00 scale, then I think this is definitely the one to go for. Well folks, thank you very much for watching this review. I do hope you enjoyed seeing the Bachmann Percy today, and it was at least worth, I think, getting one of the UK range Thomas models, just to see what the differences are. Ultimately it looks as though it is just the addition of the DCC socket and perhaps a few other minor things that I might not have noticed. But either way, I think worth doing. I've now covered Percy, and a few people were asking for that, so that's job done. And all there is left to say is thank you very, very much for watching, and I will see you again very soon. Alright, cheers folks, take care.